Hey everyone, I'm Ian Douglas, the author of the website techinterview.guide. I do live streams every Sunday and Thursday at 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Eastern about topics relevant to interview preparation for the tech industry. I occasionally record longer Q&A sessions, and I've started to break those into smaller videos to post. And there'll be information at the end of this video about how to get in contact with me if you have additional questions. Let's get to it. So a little bit similar to a question that I answered a little bit earlier this evening. In a technical interview, I made a minor syntax error and couldn't answer a question and then gave a wrong answer. Apart from that, in the 30-minute interview, everything else went really well. Is that going to be a problem? If it's just verbal questions, or they ask like, what would the syntax of, how would I split a string into an array of characters or something like that? If you don't get the syntax perfect on that, I would say if they care about that, they're probably the wrong kind of company to work for, to be honest. I think companies that ask and expect that you kind of memorize the minutia of like every little syntax call and every little API call within a language or a framework, those kinds of companies, they're a little hard to work for sometimes, because if they're that particular about you must have this like intricate, trivial knowledge of how things work in your language and your framework, what's it going to be like to work there on a day-to-day basis? Are they going to micromanage everything? Are they going to expect that you don't ever have to look up documentation, and you're just going to be really quick to implement all this stuff because you got all this stuff memorized? Like, there can be a time and place for that, but generally speaking, you want to avoid working for companies that have that as an expectation as part of their interview process. And so going back to the question, they were saying like, I made a syntax error, and then I couldn't answer a question, and then I gave a wrong answer to something else. So it sounds like a whole like cascading thing that might just come down to preparation. Again, as an interviewer, I just need to find out what you know and what you don't know. And so for their particular question that they asked, they gave a syntax error. So, they got some code wrong. That's probably not going to stop things. It's probably okay. If you couldn't answer a question, again, that's probably okay. It's just my job to find out what you know and what you don't know. But then later on, they gave a wrong answer to something else. Like, I asked a specific question and you gave me a completely wrong answer. Now, within 30 minutes, you gave me like 3 bad things. So they said, apart from that, everything else went very well. Well, maybe, or maybe you think it went well, but did you really get all of the other questions answered properly and so on? So is it going to be a problem? Again, it kind of depends a little bit on what their sort of rubric is for how they kind of go through and they write out their notes on how well they know certain sorts of topics. Like if they were asking you specifics about, say, the Python language, and you wrote some Python syntax incorrectly, it's probably not the end of the world. Like if you get the parameters out of order or something like that. But then, they said, well, later on, I couldn't answer a question like, how do you get the length of a string or something like that? And you just didn't know the answer. And then later on, they ask, well, how would you split a string into an array? And you give them the wrong method call. You're kind of showing that you don't know very much about the language, because those are kinds of like basic things that I would expect like an entry-level developer to know. But if you've got experience, like if you're an experienced level dev, I'm not going to be asking you those kinds of questions, because you're going to just go figure that stuff out. I mean, let's be real. On the job, you're going to be Googling that stuff and looking up documentation all the time anyway. That's why I was saying early in my answer, if they're that particular that you must have all these kinds of things memorized, you probably don't want to work there. And that interviewer is probably in dire need of some training on how to interview people properly. Because they should just be asking like conceptual things, like how do you use channels in Go, or how do you, what are some different ways that you can iterate over a loop in Ruby, and which one do you find yourself using the most and why? Those kinds of things. And they're more open-ended, where there's not one correct answer. Because the kinds of questions where there's only one correct answer doesn't allow for a lot of flexibility. And in my mind, that would make me think that the company then is very rigid about how they want things implemented. And that's not generally the kind of company I would want to work for. I would want some amount of flexibility on that kind of stuff, to know that, whatever I contribute is being appreciated, that it doesn't have to, necessarily conform exactly to what their expectation is. Hey, thanks for watching. I love helping people out with interview prep, and I hope this video helped you in some way. If you found this Q&A useful, please consider subscribing. You can follow me on Twitch as well for the live stream twice a week. Check out techinterview.guide/streaming for more information. I also have a daily email series that you can subscribe to on the website. There are never any ads, and when you finish the series, I scrub your information out of my database permanently. Finally, if you have a question that you'd like answered on the stream, you can find my contact info on techinterview.guide. I prefer LinkedIn or email. If you leave your question in a YouTube comment, it might take me longer to find it, but I'll see you next time.